everybody, welcome back to the next chapter of the Snowman. Now at the end of last chapter you may remember the Snowman had woken up and he was even inside James's house. And at the end of the last chapter I remember showing you this funny picture where James had put the Snowman into his freezer amongst all the frozen peas to cool him down after being near the fire. So what we are going to be doing today is reading chapters 8 and 9. So let's get reading to find out what happens next. Chapter 8. Once the Snowman was feeling cold enough, he was clambering out of the freezer, ready to explore the rest of the house. James took him upstairs, creakily, into his bedroom and showed him all his toys. They sat down and played with James's train set, and James introduced him to every single one of his cuddly animals. The Snowman liked his polar bear best, and they even crept into Grandma's room. Luckily she was sleeping soundly and snoring quite loudly, as she did sometimes. By her bed was a photograph of James, who the Snowman recognised at once. In the bathroom, James showed him how he brushed his teeth. The Snowman wanted to smell everything on the shelf: the shampoo, Grandma's special lavender soap, which he didn't like anyone else using, and the talcum powder. James showed him how to shake the powder out, but he shouldn't have done that, because before he knew it, the Snowman was going wild with the talcum powder, shaking it all over the bathroom, all over himself, and all over James too. After that, James got him out of the house as quickly as he could, before any other disasters could happen. The whole house smelled of talcum powder. They ran out into the garden, and the Snowman took one look at the swing and wanted to have a go, but he was too big to fit on it. So James sat on it and the Snowman pushed him. Higher and higher he went, so high that James felt like he was almost flying. Then, suddenly, the Snowman wasn't pushing any more. He was running towards the trampoline and climbing on. After only one bounce, he seemed to just love it. James ran over and climbed on as well. They held hands and bounced and bounced and bounced. James had never bounced so high in his life. This was the best fun he had ever had, and in the end they had to stop because they were both laughing so much. Maybe it was their laughter that woke up Big and Little. They began neighing and braying from their stables, and the Snowman wanted to find out who was making all the noise. He took James's hand and off they ran to the stables. Big and Little were only too pleased to see them. No one usually came to see them in the middle of the night, though they thought it was rather strange when they were led out into the snowy field, and they thought it stranger when James got up on Little and the Snowman got up on Big, but they didn't mind, not one bit. Nights in the stables could be long and boring, so off they trotted, and then away they galloped through the snow. It was all James could do to hang on. So up in the big oak tree the owl was watching everything, too amazed to even hoot. The Snowman rode big as if he had been riding all his life. Big and Little had never galloped so fast before, and they had never had so much fun. They were soon completely puffed out, and by the time they brought them back to their stables, so were James and the Snowman. And that was when the Snowman saw Dad's tractor. He walked round and round it, chuckling all the time, his smile becoming broader and broader. He swept the snow off the seat, climbed up and sat on it. "Well," he said, with a twinkle in his eye, "so how does this thing work? Are you coming or not?" James wasn't going to miss this. Up he climbed and sat on the Snowman's lap, just like he did with Dad. He showed him where the key was, because Dad always left it in. And he showed him the gears and the steering wheel and the throttle. That's all the Snowman needed. And with a turn of the key, the engine started up. With the grinding of gears and a push on the throttle, the tractor began to move, slowly at first, but soon they were out in the oak tree field and roaring along, bouncing along. Round and round the tree they went. Up on his branch, the owl was getting giddy watching them. Round and round his head went. And down the hill they roared along the river. They scared the deer in the woods, woke up the badgers and the foxes, and then came thundering up the hill again, back into Oak Tree Field. The Snowman drove that tractor like a proper farmer, as if he'd been doing it all his life. He chortled and chuckled and laughed out loud. He loved every moment of it. So did James. He never wanted the ride to end. Afterwards they walked back to the garden together, and James thought of all the fun and the games they must be over. He couldn't have been more wrong. The Snowman took his hand. "I've had such a good time, James," he told them. "This home of yours is full of nice surprises. Would you like to see mine? I haven't got a farm, but I have got a bit of a surprise to show you." At that moment, the snowman began to run, slowly at first, but then faster and faster and faster. He had long legs and James had short legs, so with every step James was finding it harder and harder to keep up. But suddenly he didn't have to run anymore because he couldn't. His feet weren't touching the ground. They were going so fast they were taking off. His legs were running through thin air. They were flying. The snowman had his arm round him and they were flying. James looked down. There was his house with the smoke coming out the chimney. There was the farm and there were the barns. And there was his swing. And there was Dad's shed and his trampoline. But they were all getting smaller and smaller. Higher and higher they flew, over the fields and the woods and the river, and out over the moor. Above them, the moon and the stars below them was a whole world of white. James looked round and saw they weren't all alone. There were other snowmen flying along behind, dozens of them, hundreds of them. But none of the others had a boy flying with him. He was the only one, and James liked that. He never felt more special in his life. James looked ahead. "Where are we going?" he cried. But the snowman only laughed his booming, jolly laugh, so James wasn't worried. He was enjoying himself too much to be worried. And ahead on the horizon the sky was aglow. As they flew on, he could see the glittering lights of a big city, with tall towers, wide roads, and a dark river running through it. Over the bridges and the cars came and went. James looked up. Stars filled the sky as far as he could see. He loved stars, and his dad loved them too. He even knew some of their names, and so did James. But he had never been as close to them as this. Up there was the Plough and the Big Dipper, and the Milky Way was everywhere. When he looked down again, the brightness of the city was gone. There were no lights to be seen anymore, no houses, no fields, no snowy whiteness, only a darkness that shone in the moonlight, a darkness that James knew was the darkness of the sea. Down they flew, lower and lower, over little waves, huge waves, and then over icebergs, huge icebergs. The snowman pointed ahead. "Look, James," he said. "My home." It was a land made entirely of snow. Below them now, there were no more trees or fields, or rivers or houses, no more glowing lights, no cars or bright city buildings, just snow. And it was also empty, so beautiful and so quiet. Over white mountains they floated high, and along white valleys they flew low over the snow. The snowman's arm round James, still holding him tight. "Almost there now," said the snowman. "I'm not very good at landing, James, I'm afraid. I never really got the hang of it. But don't you worry, there's plenty of snow about, and it's always deep. We'll have a nice soft landing, you'll see." But as they neared the ground, it seemed to James that they were flying lower, faster and faster, not slower and slower. So despite what the snowman had said, he was beginning to feel worried, very worried indeed. But when they did land, although they bumped and bounced and slid along the snow for quite a while, they rolled over and over in it, they ended up safe and sound because the snow, as the snowman had said, was softer than the deepest cushion. The snowman was there to help James to his feet. "Here we are, James," he said. "Snowman's Land, our home. This is where we all come back to, where all us snowmen belong. We can't stay long in your world. We have to live here when it's cold. And we aren't alone. Look up there." Okay, we'll leave it on a bit of a cliffhanger again there because we don't know what he's talking about when he says, "Look up there." So we'll have to wait and see. Okay, right, well, come again next time to see what's going to happen in Chapter 10 of The Snowman. Bye for now.